The flight attendant's hand was firm on Kyler's shoulder as she whispered, "Sir, we've had a complaint. I need you to move to a different seat immediately." Kyler stared up at her, the familiar burn of humiliation rising in his chest like it had so many times before in the desert heat of his old deployments. He was just a deadheading crew member catching a ride home to Denver after a long week, dressed in jeans and a plain gray hoodie, dog tags tucked under his shirt out of habit. The woman next to him had shifted away the moment he sat down, muttering something about "people like you," loud enough for the attendant to hear. Now the entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. Before Kyler could even stand, the intercom crackled. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Roman Ellis. We're returning to the gate. This aircraft will not depart until every passenger is treated with basic respect. No exceptions." The plane rolled to a stop on the taxiway at O'Hare, engines winding down as stunned silence turned into murmurs. Kyler's pulse hammered. Roman, the man whose voice he knew better than his own, the same voice that had whispered promises in the dark back when they were both hiding who they were. Minutes later, the door opened and ground crew appeared. Kyler grabbed his bag, legs unsteady, and stepped into the jet bridge where Roman was already waiting in his crisp uniform. Eyes locked on him with a mix of fury and fear. "You okay?" Roman asked, voice low. Kyler could only nod, the weight of every secret they'd carried for 8 years suddenly pressing down harder than any rucksack he'd ever humped. They walked through the terminal together, the incident already spreading on passenger videos. By the time they reached a quiet corner near the United Club, Kyler's phone was blowing up with texts from crew friends. "What the hell happened up there?" one read. He didn't answer. Roman pulled him into a brief, careful hug, the kind they'd perfected in public. "I couldn't let them do that to you," he said. "Not again." Kyler swallowed the lump in his throat. He thought about the night in Kandahar when they'd almost been caught, the way Roman had covered for him then too. But this time the whole world might see. They sat on hard plastic chairs, the airport buzz swirling around them, and Kyler felt the old questions rise. How much more could they lose before one of them broke? The flight had been canceled for everyone. Passengers rebooked, news vans already pulling up outside. Roman's hand brushed Kyler's knee once, hidden by their bags, and in that single touch Kyler remembered why they'd fought so hard to stay together. But the cost was climbing faster than either of them had ever planned. Outside the terminal, the Chicago wind whipped across the drop-off lanes. Reporters were shouting questions at anyone in uniform. Kyler kept his head down as they slid into a rideshare, Roman's pilot bag between them like a shield. "We need to talk about what this means," Roman said once the car merged onto the highway. Kyler stared at the passing lights, mind flashing back to the first time he'd seen Roman in flight school. Confident, steady, the kind of man who made you believe you could survive anything. Now that same man had just grounded a 737 for him. The driver glanced in the rear view but said nothing. Kyler reached over and squeezed Roman's fingers for 3 full seconds before letting go. "I know," he answered quietly. "But right now I just want to get home." The city lights blurred past, and for the first time in years Kyler wondered if home was still a place they could share without paying in pieces of themselves. Back in their Denver apartment the next morning, the TV played the clip on loop. Grainy phone footage of the announcement, Roman's calm voice cutting through the cabin noise like a lifeline. Kyler stood at the kitchen counter stirring coffee he didn't want, watching Roman pace in his sweatpants, phone pressed to his ear as airline brass demanded an explanation. "It was the right call," Roman kept repeating. Kyler's own phone vibrated again, his mother this time. "Call me. Now." He silenced it. The apartment smelled of last night's takeout and the faint leather of Roman's flight jacket hanging by the door. Every object felt heavier today. Kyler thought about the framed photo on the bookshelf. The two of them in civilian clothes at a mountain overlook, arms around each other, smiles real because no one was watching. That photo had stayed hidden from both their families for years. Now the whole country might see their faces anyway. Roman ended the call and crossed the room, pulling Kyler into a real hug this time, no one around to judge. "We faced this together," he murmured against Kyler's hair. Like always. But Kyler could feel the tremor in Roman's arms and knew the words were as much for himself as for the man he loved. The journey that started with one seat change had only just begun, and neither of them had any idea how far it would take them before they found solid ground again. The media storm hit Denver like a Colorado blizzard. By noon, the local news vans were parked outside their apartment building, reporters shouting Kyler's name every time the door opened. Roman had called in personal time, his airline still deciding whether grounding the flight counted as heroism or insubordination. Kyler sat on the couch scrolling through Twitter, hashtags like pilot stand and gay flight drama trending. Strangers were praising Roman. Others were calling Kyler everything from special snowflake to worse. He closed the app when his mother's number lit up again. This time he answered. "Mom, it's not what it looks like." Her voice cracked on the other end. "The whole church saw the video, Kyler. Your father's furious. He says you embarrassed the family name." Kyler closed his eyes, remembering the day he came home from his second tour with a purple heart and a secret that would have broken his father's heart faster than any bullet. Roman made them sandwiches neither of them ate. "We don't have to tell them everything yet," he said gently. Kyler shook his head. "They already know I'm the gay veteran now. Might as well fill in the blanks." That afternoon they drove to Roman's sister's house in Aurora for a safe place to breathe. Mia hugged them both at the door, her two kids running circles around their legs. "I'm proud of you," she told Roman. "And you," she added to Kyler, squeezing his hand. For a few hours the noise faded. Kids laughing, Mia's husband grilling burgers like it was any Sunday. But when the kids asked why Uncle Roman was on TV, the illusion cracked. Kyler stepped outside to the backyard, the Rocky Mountains hazy in the distance. Roman followed. "Remember when we met?" Kyler asked. Roman smiled faintly. "Flight school bar, you buying me a beer after I bombed the sim check." They had kept it quiet then, two young officers terrified of discharge. Now the same fear wore a different face. Public opinion, career ruin, family exile. That night back home, Roman's phone rang, airline HR. They wanted him in Chicago for a hearing. Kyler watched him pack, the silence thick. "I'll go with you," Kyler offered. Roman shook his head. "Stay here. Handle your parents. We can't both lose everything at once." The words landed like a punch. Kyler drove him to the airport the next morning, their goodbye quick and careful in the cell phone lot. Alone in the apartment, Kyler finally opened the old footlocker in the closet. Inside were letters Roman had written during separate deployments, folded small so they could be hidden. He read one aloud to the empty room, voice cracking on the line, "I love you more than the sky I fly in." Tears came then, hot and angry. He thought about every time he'd smiled through homophobic jokes in the squadron, every promotion he'd earned while pretending to be someone else. The seat change on that plane had cracked the dam, and now the flood was coming. His mother called again at midnight. "Your father wants you to come home this weekend." Alone. Kyler agreed before he could stop himself. When Roman texted from Chicago, "Hearing tomorrow. Love you," Kyler replied with a single heart emoji. He stared at the ceiling until dawn, wondering how many more pieces of their life they would have to surrender before the world let them keep the one thing that had kept them alive all these years. The drive to his parents' house in Colorado Springs felt like flying into enemy territory. Kyler's truck rattled over the familiar potholes on the street where he'd learned to ride a bike and hide who he was. His father opened the door before he could knock, face set like granite. "Inside," was all he said. His mother waited in the kitchen, eyes red. They sat at the same oak table where Kyler had once announced his enlistment with pride. Now the pride was gone. "We saw the video," his father started. "That pilot your friend?" Kyler's throat closed. He had never said Roman's name out loud in this house. "He's more than a friend, Dad." The silence that followed was louder than any explosion Kyler had survived overseas. His mother covered her mouth. His father stood so fast the chair scraped. "After everything we sacrificed for you, 2 tours medals? You throw it away on this? Kyler stayed calm even as his chest burned. He told them about meeting Roman, about the years of stolen weekends and coded texts, about the night in a forward operating base when Roman had held him through a panic attack no one else knew about. He left out the physical parts, they didn't need those details, but he didn't soften the truth. I'm tired of pretending, he finished. His mother cried quietly. His father walked to the window, back turned. You're choosing him over us? Kyler stood. I'm choosing me, Dad. For once. He left before the yelling started, driving through the mountains with the windows down until the cold air numbed his face. Back in Denver, the apartment felt too quiet without Roman. He had called from Chicago after the hearing, suspended with pay pending review. They're calling it a safety issue, Roman said, voice tight. Kyler could hear the exhaustion. That night they talked for 2 hours on video, screens the only thing connecting them. Roman looked thinner, uniform shirt unbuttoned at the collar. I'd do it again, he said. Kyler believed him, but belief didn't pay bills or mend families. The next morning, an old army buddy texted Kyler a link to a conservative blog calling them both agenda-driven distractions. Kyler deleted it, but the words stayed. He spent the day cleaning the apartment like he could scrub the shame away. When Roman finally flew home 3 days later, they met at the door like strangers for a second, then crashed together in the kind of hug that said everything words couldn't. We're still here, Roman whispered. Kyler nodded against his shoulder, but inside he wondered how many more hits they could take before one of them decided the fight wasn't worth it. Roman's family reacted differently. His mother flew in from Seattle the following weekend, hugging Kyler first. I always knew, she said simply. The acceptance should have felt like victory, but it only highlighted the chasm with Kyler's own parents. They spent Saturday at Rocky Mountain National Park, hiking trails Roman loved as a kid. Halfway up a ridge, Roman stopped, turned and said, "Marry me." Kyler laughed at first, thought it was a joke born of stress. Then he saw the seriousness in Roman's eyes. Not right now, not with all this mess, but someday, when we're ready. Kyler's answer was a kiss that tasted like pine and promise. For one afternoon, the world narrowed to just them and the mountains. Monday brought reality. The airline scheduled a joint press conference. Kyler sat in the front row while Roman stood at the podium in full uniform, reading a prepared statement about crew welfare and zero tolerance for discrimination. Cameras flashed. Later, in the green room, a senior VP pulled Kyler aside. We'd like you back in the air next month, if you're comfortable. Kyler almost laughed. Comfortable. As if the word still applied. That night Roman cooked pasta and they ate on the couch, legs tangled. My suspension ends in 2 weeks, Roman said. But they want me to do sensitivity training. Kyler set his plate down. You grounded a plane for me. They should be training everyone else. The conversation turned to the future. Whether Kyler should transfer to Roman's base in Chicago, whether they should finally come out on social media, whether love was enough when careers and families pulled in opposite directions. Roman fell asleep first, head on Kyler's chest. Kyler lay awake listening to his breathing, thinking about the betrayal that still stung. An old squadron mate had sold their story to a tabloid for quick cash. The article called Roman the gay pilot hero, and Kyler the veteran who started it all. Truth mixed with lies. Kyler wondered if forgiveness was part of growth or just another compromise. The veteran event in Washington, D.C. was supposed to be a simple speaking gig. Kyler had accepted months earlier, before the plane incident turned him into a reluctant symbol. Roman flew them both out on his recovered privileges. The hotel ballroom was packed with uniforms and suits. When Kyler stepped to the mic, the room quieted. He spoke about service, about invisible wounds, about the courage it took to be honest. Halfway through he saw Roman in the back row, nodding. Then a voice from the audience shouted, "What about the pilot?" Cameras swung. Kyler paused. The pilot did what any decent person would do, he said. He chose humanity over policy. Applause erupted, but Kyler felt the old panic rising. Later, in their hotel room, Roman paced. You didn't have to defend me. Kyler grabbed his hands. I'm done hiding you. That night, they argued for the first time in months. Roman wanted to keep their relationship private longer for career safety. Kyler wanted the world to know exactly who they were to each other. Words grew sharp, old fears resurfacing. Roman slept on the couch. Kyler stared at the ceiling, remembering the day he'd almost lost Roman to a training accident in Texas. How the fear of never saying, I love you, out loud had nearly broken him. At 3 a.m., Roman crawled back into bed. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm scared too. They held each other until sunrise, the argument settling into something stronger. The next morning, they walked the National Mall hand in hand for the first time in public. Tourists stared. A few smiled. One veteran saluted. Small steps, Kyler thought, but steps forward. 6 months later, the airline had cleared both their names. Kyler flew domestic routes again, Roman back in the left seat. Their families were still fractured. Kyler's parents sent a card on his birthday, but nothing more. But Mia's kids called Roman every Sunday. One crisp autumn evening in Denver, they stood on their balcony, watching the sunset paint the mountains gold. Roman pulled a small box from his pocket. Now? He asked. Kyler's answer was yes before the question finished. The ring felt cool and perfect on his finger. They didn't announce it loudly. Just a quiet courthouse ceremony with Mia as witness. Afterward, they drove to the same overlook from their old photo, now framed on their wall. Roman leaned against the truck, Kyler in his arms. We made it, Roman said. Kyler smiled against his neck. The scars were still there. The PTSD nights, the family silences, the public stares, but they no longer define them. Love had rewritten the story. True or false? Standing up for love between two men is always worth risking everything?